I did want to come and speak to you today. A lot of things that are popping off in the news or that have occurred in the news today that I think are very, very important. And then a bigger topic that I'd like to get to. I want to talk about the Pope and why I believe the Pope is essential and should be important to even evangelicals. So this is not a topic that you're expecting, I suspect, to hear on conservative radio or podcasting, but I think you should hear about it because we're going to talk about the Pope. We're going to talk about communism. We're going to talk about some of the latest breaking news today. We'll talk about what's happening in Israel with Gaza. Trump talks successors. Also, Diddy trial begins today. I'm going to delve deeply into that at some point this week, either tomorrow or Wednesday, simply because I do believe that I'm not a fan of these high profile cases, these high profile trials, even though, and I'm not a fan of Diddy. Let me make this emphatically clear. I assume, based on the things that I've read, I'm speculating that the guy is guilty of sin, but I don't know. Having said that, I don't appreciate the way a lot of these high profile cases play out in the media before they ever get to the courtroom. I actually believe that that's an injustice to all of us. So I know there's a lot of people that won't agree with me. And that's fine. It's okay to be wrong. But I really do believe that these high profile cases are really destroying our justice system, and everybody's giddy and they want to get Diddy and all that kind of stuff. And that's fine if he's guilty, if the evidence bears it out. But just remember, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. Even somebody that seems as scandalous as Diddy did or does, based on some of the stories that I've heard. But again, they're stories. We do have to wait for evidence. So anyway, I'll delve in a little more deeply into that. Some salacious details that may be emerging. But anyway, that trial began today. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but again, delve into it deeply. All right, Trump is talking about tariffs on films that are made outside of the USA. I'm going to give you my take on that. Trump bans China gain of function research, and also Trump's DHS to pay illegal migrants to fly out of the United States of America. In other words, a self-deport. They're going to give them a $1,000 stipend to do it. And frankly, I'm all on board with that. But I do believe that this could cause a couple of things to happen, and we'll talk about that shortly. But let me get into this. Let me talk about the Pope. Obviously, this conclave is set to happen. If I recall correctly, it's set to happen on May 7th. So just a couple of days from now, Catholics will begin, or these cardinals will begin the process of choosing the next Pope. I do want to talk about Pope Francis a little bit, and again, I will get into some of the news stories that broke as well. But let me start here, and let me tell you why this is important. All right, so here's the deal. As an evangelical, the Old Testament is important. The New Testament is important. I believe that the Bible exists. The whole entire Bible exists for our counsel. Those that will separate, well, I'm a New Testament Christian. No, you're not. How do you know you need the New Testament without the Old Testament? How do you know that you need a Savior without without the Old and New Testament? Even when you go back to the Torah, even when you go back to the Ten Commandments, when you look at the Ten Commandments, when you actually delve into the Ten Commandments, you realize that you cannot break one of the Ten Commandments without breaking all of the Ten Commandments. You realize that, right? And so we're in need of a Savior. We cannot live up to the Ten Commandments, although we should strive to do so. That's why Jesus had to shed his blood on the cross for us. What the Ten Commandments did, what the Torah did, was let us know that, man, you look at that and you're like, you know what? I can never be perfect. I'm a human being. I have faults. I still have, lustful thoughts, or I still think about, violent stuff, or I think about crazy stuff in my head, or sometimes I just make a mistake in relationships, and I'm not perfect. God help me. That's why we need a Savior. But what the Old Testament forces us to do What the Ten Commandments forces us to do is to look in the mirror, see how sinful we are, and recognize our need for a savior. And then, based upon his mercy, what we do as evangelicals, we're like, oh my Lord, help us to live a more holy life. Now, let me bring this to politics and communism and the Pope. When I was in for Mike Gallagher on Friday, I talked about Cloward and Piven, the Cloward-Piven strategy. It consists of several things, and this is more, political, but I believe that they have spiritual implications. One of them has a very spiritual implication because it has to do with religion. But just briefly, I won't go through them all. Perhaps I'll do a podcast on it. I believe I have in the past, but perhaps I'll do a podcast going through all of them again. But I did it on Mike Gallagher's show. Healthcare is one. You control healthcare and you control the people. All right. Poverty is another. Increase the poverty level as high as possible. Poor people are easier to control. This is what communists believe. This is the Cloward-Piven strategy, and will not fight back if you're providing everything for them to live. All right. So if you provide welfare for the poor, obviously they're going to be dependent upon you. They're not going to fight back. They're going to they're going to do basically whatever you want, and that is the case with the Democrat Party. Sadly, today the Democrat Party has no desire for you to be successful. They want to be successful, the leaders, the hierarchy in the Democrat Party, but they don't necessarily want you to. Debt. Increase the debt to an unsustainable level. That way you're able to increase taxes. This will produce more poverty. Again, the goal is poverty. Gun control, remove the ability to defend themselves from the government. That way you're able to create a police state. And then welfare, take control of every aspect of their lives. Speaking of voters, food, housing, and income. When you do that, you control people. Education, take control of what people read and listen to. Take control of what children learn in school. That's why school choice is a big deal. That's why, frankly, making sure that we fight for school board memberships if you're conservative, because obviously more kids are going to be in public school than in private school, or deal with school choice or homeschooling. It's very important that we're in schools. Religion is one. I'll circle back to that. Class warfare. You see AOC and Bernie Sanders out there fighting all oligarchy tool, where they're diving heavily into the class warfare thing right now. But if you divide people into the wealthy and the poor, this will cause more discontent, and it will be easier to take the wealthy with the support of the poor, or to tax the wealthy with the support of the poor. And that's what you do. You turn people against each other based upon class, based upon income. You can also do that with race. Religion, remove the belief in God from the government and schools. And why would you do that? Listen, the left is very smart when it comes to this communist thing. If you remove the belief in God from the government and from schools, where do most kids go? Where do most kids go to learn? Listen, we can take our kids to church, an hour a week. You can take them to Bible lesson, Sunday school, or what have you. But you have a church that has them, or I'm sorry, you have a public school system that has them at least 40 hours a week. And this is so crucial. This is why the Pope, even in my opinion, is more crucial than people might want to, than people might understand, might believe, might get. And so even for evangelicals, because there's such a large platform associated with the Pope, I think it's important that you have not a conservative Pope, not a progressive Pope, although I believe that we've had both, but a Pope that is steeped in biblical principles, that is steeped in the Word of God, because it's going to have huge consequences. It's going to have huge impact. The left got a little crazy. I'll be honest with you. I was talking to Gabe about this before the show. And the left got really apoplectic about a meme that appeared of President Trump dressed as the Pope. Perhaps I shouldn't be laughing, but this, according to Breitbart, Trump said that Catholics loved the AI image depicting him as the Pope, which the official White House account posted on Saturday. Trump, who has taken a number of pro-religious liberty actions since returning to office, shot down a reporter in the Oval Office on Monday when she said, quote, some Catholics were not so happy about the image of you looking like the Pope, close quote. Now, I believe it was Jackie Heinrich of Fox News. She's a great reporter. And perhaps, she was getting feedback from Catholics. So I'm not going to throw shade at her. She's typically a really good one. She goes on to say, oh, Trump says, quote, oh, I see you mean they can't take a joke. You don't mean the Catholics. You mean the fake news media. The Catholics loved it, close quote. Trump also added that he did not create the image or post it to the White House account. He said, quote, I had nothing to do with it. Somebody made up a picture of me dressed like the Pope and they put it out on the internet. That's not me that did it. He said, I have no idea where it came from. Maybe it was AI, but I know nothing about it. I just saw it last evening. Close quote. Now, I'm going to return with this on the other side, and I'm going to tell you why this is a nothing burger. You're listening to the Carl Jackson Show. We will be back momentarily. Hey guys, I appreciate you tuning in to the Carl Jackson Show. This is your daily dose again of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Please subscribe to my podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. The Carl Jackson Show on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. If you're on YouTube and Rumble, please rate and review the show. That would go a long way to help us out. Salem Podcast Network is another place you can go, The Carl Jackson Show. And also don't forget X, Instagram, and Facebook as well. And yes. All right. So unfortunately, we're not live on Facebook today because we were having some technical difficulties. But there is a link on our Facebook page. Is that correct, Gabe? That'll take you to the YouTube channel. If you'd like to watch there, we would certainly appreciate that. Real quickly as well, I'd like to talk to you about My Pillow. My Pillow is excited to announce that they are extending the mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products as well. This is your chance to grab incredible deals on some of My Pillow's most popular and newly released items. For example, you can save $40 on a new spring My Pillow bed sheets. They're available in any size and color. These luxurious sheets are designed for maximum comfort and breathability. They're perfect for a great night's sleep. If you're looking for a meaningful gift, you can save 30% on the brand new My Crosses that are inspired by the one that Mike Lindell has worn every day for 20 years. These beautifully crafted crosses come in both men's and women's designs, and they're made in the USA. You can also get the 6-piece bath or kitchen towel sets for just $39.98. Initial quantities are limited, so please don't wait. And don't forget the best-selling standard My Pillow, the pillow that I cannot sleep without, is now just $17.98. All you have to do, orders of $75, excuse me, ship for free. Go to mypillow.com. Use my name, Carl, C-A-R-L. I don't spell it like the communists. Mypillow.com. Promo code Carl. Call 800-858-0263 to order now. That is 800-858-0263 to order now, or mypillow.com. Promo code Carl. Okay. So let me get back to the issue. We were talking before we went to the break. Welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. And before we went to the break, we were talking about the outrage that the left has had over the AI generated meme of President Trump dressed as the Pope. And frankly, I didn't know how to feel about that, how to feel about it at first. But as the day progresses and the day has progressed, I'm not offended by it. I'm not a Catholic, but I'm not offended by it. But I could understand how some people might be. I could also understand, because this is where I sit, where I'm not sure that it's a big deal at all. As a matter of fact, the more that I think about it, I think it's a distraction. And I'll tell you what I believe it's a distraction from. And I'll circle back to the Pope as well. And again, I'll bring you some of the latest breaking news. There is news out there that, oh man, did you guys hear about that New York, New Jersey that went down line? I mean, was just off. Everything was off. Radar was off for like 30 seconds. That could have been an absolute disaster, a nightmare. So that's one of the pieces of news that hit today. That's absolutely insane. But let me get back to this AI image, and let me bring this full circle. Trump added that First Lady Melania Trump thought the image was cute, quote unquote. He said, actually, my wife thought it was cute. She said, isn't that nice? Um, he said, actually, I would not be able to be married, though. That would be a lot, he said, close quote. He said he caused NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, who's on Trump's right to laugh. They announced that the NFL will be having their draft next year in Washington, D.C. on the mall. I actually think that will be pretty cool. He went on to say, quote, to the best of my knowledge, popes aren't big on getting married. Are they? He asked the question. When the reporter followed up to ask if the AI image diminished, quote, the substance of the official White House account, close quote, Trump responded, give me a break. He went on to say, somebody did it in fun. It's fine. You have to have a little fun, don't you? Close quote. Now, you have J.D. Vance, that's a devout Catholic. He said he thought it was absolutely funny, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, but he posted that out on X. But and then I got to thinking, and I've heard other talk show hosts, so I'm not alone in this, saying this today. But are the left? It was the left really that was going crazy about this, not necessarily Catholics, although I'm sure some Catholics are upset. And I don't want to minimize that, but I'm sure some are upset. But mostly it was the media. I'll be honest with you. And obviously X is you can kind of see where at least the more vocal people on the left and the right what they have to say about it. But just on Facebook posts and so on, etc., I don't see any major outrage, over the meme. But the media certainly is outraged, and they're looking for any opportunity they can gain a window to kind to exact or to dissect or to pull away some of Trump's support. And sadly, I think it comes down to that, because I started thinking, wow, this is a real distraction. So they're upset about an image, but they're not upset about a pope or a Catholic church that would give Nancy Pelosi, that would give Senator Harry Reid, that would give Chuck U. Schumer, or any leader within the Democrat Party communion, even though they're not just pro-choice, they're pro-abortion. That's pretty astonishing. Also, if you guys recall, under the Biden administration, Catholics and pro-lifers, evangelicals as well, but Catholics primarily, were being spied on by the FBI, by the DOJ. You had pro-life Catholics whose homes were raided. Crickets from the left. Crickets. But the meme, I mean, you can jail a religious person in America because they stand up for life. But God forbid you post a meme. Remember when the Dodgers, and the Dodgers are my team. I didn't watch them that season. All right. But when they had I don't even know what they're called, but the men pretending to be women that were mocking nuns. I mean, it was just absolutely disgusting. And then you saw a bunch of people, even Dodgers fans, that rose up and protested them being at those Dodgers games. And then the Dodgers cooled off on them. I'm not sure if they ever came back or not. Maybe they did. But at least for that moment, enough fans rose up, Catholics and evangelicals alike, that were literally protesting in the street, telling the Dodgers, what are you doing? Don't have these people here. They were absolutely disgusting, mocking Jesus, mocking the Christian faith, mocking Catholicism. Crickets. The media were ready to go to bat for them. But for a meme? No. See, but the media was willing to go to bat for them because a lot of these people in these movements, Catholic, evangelical, sadly, many times, many people, many churches have fallen to communism. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's the truth. Some of the Cloward-Piven strategy we mentioned. Let me give you some reasons why socialism and Marxism are antithetical to biblical Christianity. And then I want to get into the Pope. Socialism is against the biblical view of the nuclear family. Now, one of the things that Pope Francis would say, or people would say about Pope Francis, and again, listen, I my prayer is always that whether it's a pope, whether it's a whether it's a peon in an evangelical church, that they have gotten right with Jesus Christ before they pass. That is always my hope. That's always my hope. But one of the things that troubles me is a statement that I would hear that Pope Francis was the people's pope. And I sat there thinking, the people's pope, the people's pope. And that sounds nice. That sounds innocent, doesn't it? I'm not a Catholic. But I got to tell you, on the outside, I'm thinking the people's pope. Shouldn't it be the servant of Jesus Christ? Shouldn't it be the pope of Jesus Christ? I understand in the Catholic faith that basically the pope, if you will, and I know that I'm going to frame this incorrectly, so forgive me. It's basically the continuation, if you will, of Saint Peter, the Apostle Peter. But oftentimes the Pope had a radical worldview of when it came to welcoming people in, helping out the refugee, so to speak. I almost think to a point where it became a way to, and I honestly, I don't feel comfortable saying this, but almost as a way to virtue signal. See, God is the God of the rich and the poor alike. You know, there was a scripture in Proverbs that I was reading just the other day, and I'm going to misquote it, but basically, in the Bible, the gentleman was saying, God, don't give me little, because don't make me poor, because I don't want to go out and rob and steal, but don't make me wealthy, so wealthy where I forget about you. So you understand there could be greed when it comes to the rich and the poor. Socialism goes against the biblical worldview of the nuclear family. Marxists argue that the nuclear family performs ideological functions for capitalism. The family acts as a unit of consumption and teaches passive acceptance of hierarchy. It is also the institution through which the wealthy pass down their private property to their children, thus reproducing class inequality. Hence, socialism is against the biblical principle of parental rights related to their children and the prominence of the nuclear family. So there's a lot of people out there that say, listen, and by the way, I don't know. I believe this may have been the Christian Post. I'm not sure. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Joseph Matera. Um, so there's a lot of people, even in the Christian faith and in Catholicism, that believe in socialism. And guys, it's just not biblical. Socialism is against the biblical principle of parental rights, again, related to children and the prominence of the nuclear family. You can see it in Genesis 1:28 through 29, Proverbs 22 through 6, Ephesians 5:22, 6 through 4. Socialists also claim that education belongs solely to the state. That's number 2. So Marxist education aims at producing faithful citizens. Therefore, it is primary and ideological tool to program children to be loyal to the state. In communist and socialist nations, education and the curriculum are controlled by the state, and they're not considered the responsibility of the parents. This is why when people say, hey, listen, we don't want we're not looking for a political pope. We're not looking for a conservative. We're not looking for a progressive or conservative pope. I hope that's true, but it's not realistic, because people are people, and people have worldviews, and people have ideas. And oftentimes, sadly, even within Catholicism, even within the evangelical movement, a lot of pastors, a lot of people in high positions will oftentimes equate or conflate their biblical worldviews with politics. It can be done, and it happens all the time. But guys, to sit here and pretend as if politics doesn't impact the church is absolute nonsense, or that the church could justify politics that are anti-biblical. It happens. And sadly, I believe it happened with the last pope. We'll talk about it more. You're listening to the Carl Jackson Show. We'll be back in a few. All right, guys, just a reminder, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. We're on Apple, we're on Google, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube and Rumble. I'm taking a bit of a different track tonight, although I will talk about some political issues because I do think they're important. But I do want to circle back to this because I think it is so important, um, even for evangelicals. I started I started to title today's program a little differently as well, but I didn't do that. Please, just a reminder, on Facebook, we were having technical difficulties. There is a link on the Carl Jackson Show at Facebook where you can click on that link to go to our YouTube channel. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would certainly appreciate that. Rumble as well, if you prefer Rumble, Salem Podcast Network, or wherever you go to get your podcast, The Carl Jackson Show. We're also on X, we're on Instagram and Facebook as well. Again, tonight, technical difficulties, but we are on there. So just a reminder of that. Okay. All right. So welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show. Again, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. And we are talking about the news, but we're also talking about the Pope. The conclave begins for the Catholic Church, I believe, in just a couple of days. And I believe that the Pope is just as important to the evangelical movement and to Christianity as it is, or as the Pope is to Catholicism, simply because of the platform. And I know a lot of people are, listen, I don't want my Pope to get political. I don't want my Pope to be political. Guys, we live in a fallen world, and politics is part of it. Politics is a part of everyday life, just like anything else. Now, I do believe that your faith should rise above politics, but also your faith and your worldview should shape your politics, and it should certainly shape the politics of a pope or of a pastor. And so many times, sadly, that isn't the case. So I want to get back to socialism and the Pope. But before I do that, I do want to bring a couple of news stories to you. Obviously, um, earlier today, you guys may have heard this news, and I thought it was uh, uh, very important. Trump keeps his promise by signing an executive order banning federal funding of gain of function research. We had some video for you guys, but frankly, I was just having some problems with the clips. So we'll have to play those for you another day. But Trump keeps his promise. At tip, just the news. By signing this executive order, he says here, for decades, policies overseeing gain of function research on pathogens, toxins, and potential pathogens have lacked adequate enforcement, transparency, and top-down oversight. The White House said researchers have not acknowledged the legitimate potential for societal harms that this kind of research poses. And also, I got to give credit to Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul. This is something that he fought for big time. He would have his back and forths with fascist Fauci all the time, basically catching the guy lying when it came to gain of function. So, but Trump has kept his promise he made last year by signing this executive order now that bans federal funding for gain of function research in countries like China and Iran, which is believed to be at the heart of the COVID-19 lab leak in Wuhan. And this is very important because obviously we don't want our enemies to use those as weapons against us. And I believe, frankly, that's what happened last go around. Trump also outlined his plan to deal with gain of function research. He says for decades, basically what I just read. Um, so this is good news. The executive order also allows U.S. research agencies to identify and end federal funding of other biological research that could cause a future pandemic or pose a threat to American health and safety. All right, so I think that is a really good thing. Also in the news, I'm sure you guys heard about this because it was a big part of the news today. I had to Breitbart, the Trump administration, to pay migrant flights of illegals who self-deport. Now, I like this idea because I don't believe you're going to be able to get all of the illegals. You're looking at anywhere from estimates of 10 to 20 million illegals that came in just during the Biden administration. We absolutely have no clue. And the Trump administration, as hard as they've been working, you have these judges that are trying to slow them down, prevent them from deporting the illegals that invaded our country. And at this point, I believe in the first 100 days, they've been able to deport upwards of close to or approximately 70,000 illegals. And even though that is a great pace, obviously that is not on pace to get rid of 10 or 20 million illegals. So, as someone said earlier, and I liked how this was framed, don't recall who said it, but this actually was Hugh Hewitt, our colleague at Salem, with the Salem Media Group. Basically, this is another tool in Trump's shed. But I also wonder this: if illegals hear this, will they think, oh, wait a minute, they're not able to get us? Like, will they wait it out? Oh man, they're getting desperate. I don't know. I hope that we will get past these rogue judges and this judge fair. I believe these rogue judges that are don't have the authority. And Trump had a win over the weekend on that as well. I'll talk about that another day. But hopefully we'll get past this. Hopefully the Supreme Court will do due diligence, do their job, and stop these rogue federal district judges from trying to play president. So here's what Breitbart says. The Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security will begin paying for migrant flights for illegals who self-deport and provide them with a stipend once they are confirmed to have left the country. All right. So DHS will make the announcement today, noting they will offer assistance to pay for commercial flights of illegals who willingly self-deport from the country. Additionally, they will receive a $1,000 stipend upon proof of exit. Now, when I first heard that, I was like, 1,000, but 1,000 in Guatemala. You know what I'm saying? 1,000 in Mexico goes a lot further. All right. DHS says this will ultimately be far more cost effective for taxpayers, noting that self deportation also deprioritizes their detention and removal from authorities. Per the release, self deportation is a dignified way to leave the U.S. and will allow illegals to avoid being encountered by ICE, even with the cost of the stipend. It is projected that the use of CBP home will decrease the cost of a deportation by around 70%. Currently, the average cost to arrest, detain, and remove an illegal alien is $17,121. So you pay for a commercial flight, you give them a stipend once they provide proof that they've arrived on the other side, so to speak, and you save buttloads of money and you save buttloads of headache. You don't have ICE going and hunting people down. That could turn into a very nasty situation. You give people a little money, and frankly, it doesn't overwhelm our hospitals. They don't overwhelm our schools. You have low income people and upwards of middle income people that are not competing for housing and rent. When it comes to illegals, that happens a lot, especially in places in blue cities like LA. It's a big problem there. They also say the first use of travel assistance has already occurred. An illegal alien that the Biden administration allowed into the country utilized the program to receive a ticket for a flight from Chicago back to Honduras. Additional tickets have already been booked for this week, according to the DHS. In order to self-deport, the illegal immigrant must register on the Custom Border and Protection Home app and alert the government of their intention to leave the country. Once the illegal immigrant does that, they will be deprioritized for ICE arrest and will maintain the ability to return to the U.S. legally in the future. All right, so that gives them a way to return legally. I listen. I think you got to throw everything at this thing, and I am totally okay with that. But I do wonder if some will see this, some illegals, and say, wait a minute. If they're offering us $1,000, it must mean they can't get all of us, and maybe they're not motivated in that way. I don't know. But honestly, you got to throw everything at this problem. And it sickens me that there's no apparatus. And actually, frankly, there is without Judge Fair to turn. You get 20 million people upwards that came into the country illegally. They didn't have to have any type of hearings. They don't, but you have to have hearings and due process. And quite frankly, how much time, Gabe? And frankly, there's the due process has been explained incorrectly. When a criminal illegal alien commits another crime besides coming into the country, they get due process. Otherwise, the due process is simply, all right, illegal or an immigrant judge, you're this person, you came from this country, you okay, adios. It's not like it should be a long drawn out trial. You identify the person, they're out. That's essentially what the Obama administration did, and that's the way that it should happen. And frankly, even there are two ways, and I forget how, where they don't even need to go before an immigration judge. But anyway, that's that. Now, let me get back to this. I won't have time to get through all of the things when it comes to socialism. But socialism, and this is why the Pope is so important. You need a Pope that speaks to biblical truth. You need a Pope that speaks clarity when it comes to the Bible. And again, I'll get into some of the things that Pope Francis was known for, and mostly it was sadly a bunch of confusion, and this coming from many Catholics. Socialists claim the state deserves the highest allegiance. This is why you don't want anyone with communist or socialist leanings. You want people to lead. You want a pope. You want a leader that leads people to Christ, not to communism. In many communist nations like the former Soviet Union and modern day countries like North Korea and China, Bibles are confiscated, church buildings are burned, evangelism is illegal. This is because they see Christianity as a rival religion. You got to remember that communism is a religion of itself. All of these, all of these, communism, socialism, they're a religion in and of themselves. But you get these communists and they see Christianity as a rival, as a threat. And so they got to get rid of it. So socialists want the highest allegiance. Socialists believe in the abolition of private property and land and the application of all rents of land to public purposes. This is also antithetical to biblical premise, to the biblical premise of the individual right to own private property and the command for believers to create wealth to promote God's covenant. Exodus 20:15, Deuteronomy 8:18, 1 Kings 20, verse 6, Isaiah 65:21 through 22, Mark 10:39 through 21. Also, socialism advocates a progressive income tax. And I'll talk about that after the break. You are listening to the Carl Jackson Show. A little more news that I want to get to. And also, we'll be talking about Pope Francis, the confusion I believe that was left behind, and why I believe it's important, even for evangelicals, to want a Pope that speaks with clarity, because as a person of faith, the Pope has the biggest platform out there for all religions. We'll be back. This is the Carl Jackson Show. All right, guys, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show again. Well, actually, I just want to tell you, please subscribe to the Carl Jackson Show. The Carl Jackson Show is where you can go to find our podcast. So I would certainly appreciate that wherever you go to get your podcast, YouTube, Rumble. That would be great. That would be greatly appreciated. Um, and also all things social media, X, Instagram, and Facebook at Carl Jackson Show is where you can go. Is where you can go to find me. All right. So, oh, man, there's so many things that I want to get to. All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Just some more news that I want to make mention of before we get on to the lessons about the Pope, and why I think it's very important for the Pope. Everyone, the left, people on the left were outraged about the meme earlier this week of President Trump as the Pope, but they weren't outraged about the treatment from the Biden administration when it comes to babies inside of the womb, when it comes to the weaponization of the DOJ against pro-life Catholics. For some reason, the media was not upset. About that. The censorship when it came to people of faith and church going during the COVID lockdowns. A couple of things that I do want to make mention of. Obviously, the Houthi strike on Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv. There is going to be a response from Israel, but the airport was closed entirely for an hour, and many international carriers have suspended flights. Ballistic missile, this from Breitbart, fired by the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, struck the ground inside the perimeter of Israel's Ben Gurion Airport on Sunday. The missile struck, quote, a grove adjacent to an access road inside the airport's perimeter, the Times of Israel noted. And The Houthi rebels have since come out and said they intend to shut down basically travel into that airport. So these people aren't playing, and we can't play with them either. I know many of you may or may not disagree with me on this. I don't want to play when it comes to Iran. I don't want to get in a Middle Eastern war. I don't think we need to get into the Middle Eastern war, but I think we need to back Israel so they can get the job done. Whatever weapons they need to buy to do so, they need to get rid of these people. Trump announces a 100% tariff on movies made overseas. He says we want movies made in America again. So Hollywood executives ought to love this. They say, according to the Los Angeles Times, looking to boost the production of Hollywood movies in the U.S. President Trump on Sunday announced a new tariff. 100% tariff applied on films produced overseas. For more than 2 decades, major studios have shifted movie production to cheaper countries. That includes Canada, the UK, Bulgaria, New Zealand, Australia, and other countries that offer generous tax benefits to build their local economies, luring films away from Hollywood. And I got to tell you, I love the sentiment of this, but I disagree with this. And that's simply because, listen, it's a lot of these films are made in blue cities like LA. And if blue cities don't want to make it where Hollywood can produce films affordably, that's on them if they're going to lose money. I don't want the government telling me that, listen, you should make movies here. But I get what Trump is doing. The more I think about Trump, you know who Trump reminds me of in a sense? He reminds me of a John Wayne. He wants the old Americana, the way that it used to be, when Hollywood made films that loved America. And sadly, that isn't the case anymore. So I think he's trying to help Hollywood out in that sense, trying to give them some American pride. I understand why he's doing it. I just don't agree with it. Secretary of State Rubio sends a warning to Germany. Germany just gave its spy agency new powers to surveil their opposition. He says that's not democracy, it's tyranny in disguise. What is truly extremist is not the popular AFD, which took second in the recent election, but rather the establishment's deadly open border immigration policies that the AFD opposes. So that's Secretary of State Marco Rubio. In another note, another story, Treasury Secretary Besson makes a case for Trump's economic agenda. I think it's really smart to put him out there as much as possible. He made the case in the Wall Street Journal. He says it's Main Street's turn to share in the prosperity. First, he wants to renegotiate. What the Trump administration would like to do is renegotiate global trade. That's what they're doing now. Tariffs are an effective tool for balancing international commerce. Second, making the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts permanent. That's going to be important. Third, deregulating the economy. That's going to be important. You can't slow down innovation. That's how America became America. And then let us keep more of our money. We're the ones that work for it. So America must build again. Part and parcel of the deregulation agenda is establishing energy dominance, and the list goes on. Trump wants to make Alcatraz great again. It's a symbol of law and order. I think this is just like the Hollywood thing. I think Trump enjoys symbolism. Hollywood used to be men, Americana. It isn't anymore. And I think that's where Trump wants to take it back to. Alcatraz, you think of Alcatraz, it's the epitome of law and order. Bad guys go to Alcatraz. So I see what Trump is doing. All right. So don't have much time left, but let me get to this. Socialism opposes the rights of family inheritance. Socialism, the state attempts to control all communication. These are some of the symptoms, if you will, of socialism, or these are some of the tactics of socialism, and it's just not good. And that's why you want clarity from the Pope. That's why you want clarity from the pulpit. In socialism, a utopia comes from a revolutionary change from the outside in. So Marxist utopianism lay in the aim of abolishing the distinction between state and civil society, and in the harmony he assumed would emerge. This goes against the biblical principle that systemic change doesn't start from the outside. Instead, it starts from the inside when people are born again in their hearts from above. All right. Socialism categorizes people as either the oppressed or the oppressors. So that is another thing. You don't. What a spiritual leader should do is bring people together, regardless of skin color, regardless of how much money is in their wallet, because you get them all focused on the Lord Jesus Christ, their own failures. I have my own failures and weaknesses and so on, just like the rest of you out there. Socialism believes the government is responsible for all social care, and that is just simply wrong. And sadly, there's a lot of NGOs, even within the evangelical movement, and these weren't people that were doing dirt, not necessarily all of them, that were like, hey, if USAID shuts down, our group, we're legit, we're not stealing, we're not doing this, we're not doing anything controversial, but we're getting money from USAID. And my thought is, you shouldn't. You should get money from your church. You should get money from fellow believers that believe in your cause. You shouldn't get it from government. That's not what our government exists for. Now, so let me go to one of these, and now I don't know where it is. Am I firmly fixed? Oh, okay, this was from the Spectator World, and I just want to go through some of this briefly. But the gentleman wrote, this was a couple of weeks back, from the Spectator World, how Pope Francis will be remembered. He says, modern popes, for better or worse, tend to be defined in sound bites. John Paul II's clarion call to be not afraid became emblematic of his invitation to young Catholics to embrace their faith, and his rallying to the West against the spectator of international communism. Benedict XVI, great theological career and his term as a pope and the motto of priest and professor remains summed up in his simple declaration of "Do caritas est." I don't know what that means. For Francis, the world, but I love Pope Benedict. I would read some of his stuff. John Paul, from what I've read of him, obviously everybody or many people loved him. The West certainly did. Ronald Reagan certainly did. The United States certainly did. For Francis, the world will likely remember, in the immediate weeks after his death anyway, his often quoted, though often misrepresented motto of, quote, "Who am I to judge?" Close quote. All right, uttered during one of his habitual in-flight press conferences in response to a question about gay clergy who sought to live their ministry and their lives faithful to the church's teaching on human sexuality. It became a shorthand for a pope committed more than anything to a radical posture of welcome, a Vatican II pope. He was dubbed in the media, dedicated to throwing open wide the church's doors to Catholics and indeed to everyone without censure or reservation about their complicated lives. Now, let me say this. When it comes to the Lord Jesus Christ, come one, come all. We don't judge people that are non-believers coming into the church. But at some point, if the Lord gets a hold of them, you expect to see change. And you expect to say, listen, this is where you're at. We accept you exactly where you are. But when you get closer to Jesus, when you get closer to God, you get to know you can't help but to change. And that's important. You can't help but to change based on a biblical worldview, not based on what anyone is saying, but based on a biblical worldview. But if that is how the world saw Francis, those living with and within the bubble, speaking of Catholics, on the daily life of the world's largest church, will remember a different kind of pope, a contradictory and mercurial pontiff who often appeared less like a sure helmsman of the bark of St. Peter and more like a man struggling to ride a horse, bolting in several directions at once. Few now remember that when he stepped onto the famous balcony over St. Peter's Square in 2013, he emerged as a pope elected with a clear mandate not to renew the faith, but to reform a Vatican plagued by scandal and corruption. By that measure, his legacy is to see, though easy to see, but harder to sum up. Francis instituted wave after wave of financial and legal reform at the Vatican, while visibly turning on his reformers, such that he reigned to see both the conviction of Cardinal Angelo Becciu, I don't know how to pronounce his name, his former chief of staff, for financial crimes related to a London property scandal, and also the public defenestration of Liberal Malone, the auditor who caught him. Let me just go on here. Um, for those, and there were many who expected Francis to be the Pope to break with centuries of church teaching on issues like gay relationships or the role of women in the hierarchy, he proved himself an equally dramatic actor, but unreliable fixture. Major sexual abuse scandals involving bishops and cardinals led to a global summit and landmark legislation in 2019, yet few of the new rules and none of the promises of transparency were brought to bear when friends of Francis, like Argentine Bishop Oscar, found themselves indicted for crimes of abuse. In other words, he talked a good game, but he didn't follow through, and he was very progressive in his leaning. We can't have that next time. Carl Jackson, God bless you.